So we're out here today at the Women's March 2020. I see you have a sign over here where it's the American flag with a W on it. It says, "We Women Win, Warren." Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here and the significance of the sign?
Well, yeah, I've been a Warren fan ever since, I don't know. I wanted her to run back in 2015, and I was sorry she didn't. I just been following her career. She's been doing amazing things in public service way before she was ever elected for anything. She's the real deal, and yeah, I'm thrilled that she's running.
I know the Women's March is specifically significant now because Warren had something that came out this week where she said in 2016 she had a conversation with Bernie Sanders where Bernie Sanders said that a woman couldn't be president. Do you believe Warren when she says that, and do you think Bernie Sanders is a sexist for saying it?
I think there's probably too big a deal being made of this. He probably said that in passing in some context. I think obviously, you know, he even said he waited to see if Elizabeth was going to run before he ran in 2016. So he obviously thinks that a woman can win. So maybe he said something. They're probably both right. I really think.
Well, how could they both be right? Because they're calling each other liars at this point.
Right, but he, you know, maybe he doesn't remember he said something 4 years ago, you know, like that. I don't think, you know, would be hard for a woman to win or something like that.
Would you vote for Bernie if he was the eventual nominee, even though he may have said something like that?
Absolutely. I love Bernie.
That's really cool.
I love Bernie.
I wanted to ask you, too, critics of the march say that this is just like an anti-Trump march. Is this more than just an anti-Trump march?
Well, Trump has made the world a disaster, so we're all, you know, I think this is a frantic march, and definitely it's for things, primarily. It's for human rights for everybody. It's for definitely women's issues, but everybody's issues. And Trump, you know, obviously you have to be against Trump in order.
Is this march inclusive to women who may be pro-Trump or pro-life as well? Is this an all-inclusive march to all women, no matter what political beliefs they have?
Well, it should be. I don't think it probably isn't, but it should be.
Yeah. How do we make it one of those marches then, if that's what it should be, right? If it's a women's march, all women, should we aim to be inclusive like that?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting idea that I never even thought about. But if the leaders of the march put out a call way in advance to have that happen, that would be interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
I also wanted to follow up with you. On a lot of college campuses today, we talk a lot about toxic masculinity. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the phrase, but what does that mean to you, toxic masculinity, if anything?
I wasn't aware of that phrase, but I mean, I wondered myself why they had men speaking here. There's certainly, yeah, I mean, this is a women's moment. Let's have a moment and just, and from that moment, just make everything equal in the world, which it isn't yet.
So we are out here today for the 2020 Women's March. It's beautiful snowing. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you guys are out here, what it means for you guys to be out here? Women first?
Yeah, okay. The three of us are with, all three of us are women and gender nonconforming people who kind of recognize young people who recognize the importance of being out here to stand in kind of solidarity with a intersectional feminist movement that is not just inclusive of white women, but is inclusive of people who do not conform to the gender binary, people who are not white, people who are queer, people who are of a lower socioeconomic class. Anyone else has things to add?
I want to follow up on that point. People critique this march as like an anti-Trump march. Is this inclusive to women who may be pro-Trump or women who may be pro-life?
Does anyone else want to speak on that? Or?
Yeah, any other, you guys have any thoughts on that?
I don't have any thoughts on that.
Cool. I see you have a Bernie Sanders sign. Very interesting sign. I know there was some drama in the news recently. Elizabeth Warren said she had a 2016 meeting with Bernie Sanders where Bernie said that a woman couldn't be president. Elizabeth Warren was saying this. Do you think Elizabeth Warren is being honest here? Do you guys think Bernie Sanders is a sexist?
We're split. This group is split.
I think she's being honest. I don't think she's saying Bernie Sanders is a sexist. I think if you read that her statement, she at no point says that he's a sexist. She says that what the news reported was true. and that they disagreed, but in her statement, she continued to say that they were friends and that she didn't want to talk about it anymore.
You don't think she was implying that he was sexist there?
I think implications are something that people take outside of what she said.
What do you guys think about that?
I think that this campaign is about building a working class movement that unites all people, and the media will use every tool that they can to try and split apart any potential coalitions. I don't think that this matters. I think if you go to people around the country, they are more concerned about the issues that they face than a meeting that happened 2 years ago.
You were saying it was the media kind of perpetrating this. Isn't it Elizabeth Warren who was perpetrating this? Her and her allies were the people who were really pushing this issue. So, I mean, the media's enjoying the circus, but Elizabeth Warren was definitely the person who let this go out there.
I think that that's a question for Elizabeth Warren.
I think it was CNN who published the article, not her.
It was somebody from her camp that leaked the original info, but definitely it wasn't. You would think it was from CNN.
No, it was from 4 sources that had knowledge of the conversation, but it was not from her campaign.
As I understand, it was Warren allies, but we could look that up and confirm that.
Also, Warren allies do not mean Warren campaign. Like someone who's on Warren's campaign, it would be different if it was like known that it was like her campaign manager. That would be very different than if it's someone who's like a Warren supporter.
I wanted to pivot a little bit. You guys are firm believers that trans women are obviously women, right?
Yes. I think that is a conversation that shouldn't even be had.
Do you think that there's an issue with trans women having a competitive advantage over women assigned female at birth?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean there? Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I think the problem with that is it is a straw man's argument that in the context of trans rights, trans athletes need to be supported, but there are so many more trans people that are hurt by straw man arguments regarding trans athletes.
Well, why is this a strong man argument? Because trans women do have a competitive advantage over women assigned female at birth. Do you not agree with that?
So, are you speaking about trans women who are on estrogen and hormone replacement therapy?
If you were assigned male at birth and then you eventually transition into a woman, you will have a physical competitive advantage. Just because men are generally faster, can jump higher, have more short muscle fibers than women do.
I think actually when you look at people who go on hormone replacement therapy, it makes their muscles significantly weaker, and they have to work at an excess to be at even a baseline level.
Do you not think trans women have a competitive advantage over women assigned female at birth?
I don't think so.
A minuscule issue in the grand scheme of things, and it's a very easy issue to attach to when there are many trans people who aren't athletes, aren't in professional sports, and their struggles are much more important than the few trans people who are athletes, because they're trans women who are getting kicked out of their homes every single day. It's much harder for them to get
being trans?
Yes.
If it's so self-evident that the working class trans people and their struggles are more significant to the conversation, why do you frame it upon the straw man argument of trans athletes? Why do you frame it around that area if you concede that the working class trans people's struggle needs to be the center of the conversation?
Black trans women
I'll tell you why. Because the question comes down to, is there a distinction between men and women? And this is one of the things that makes people identify a distinction. So the follow-up question will be, is there a difference between men and women?
No. So when you're talking about gender, it has nothing to do with someone's biological sex. Gender is a social construct related to a variety of different roles that people play within society. So biological sex is a completely different question.
So no difference between men and women gender-wise?
No. Other than the roles that make someone a man and make someone a woman, but that has nothing to do with someone's biological sex.
Why should this be a women's march then if there's no distinction between genders of men and women? We're out here at a women's march. Doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose?
So, I'll let you go in. Because
yeah, I mean, whatever. I respect you and wanted.
Sure.
This was our conversation.
Yeah. So, there's historical and even current the misogynistic. We live in a patriarchal society, so there is systemic issues that women face throughout all ends of society. So whether or not there are actual inferiorities, which is not the case.
Not necessarily inferiorities, but just differences. It doesn't have to be inferior or not for differences to exist.
There are actual barriers that women face at all levels. So that's why we need to stand up and fight for equality.
Absolutely. Just quickly in conclusion, anything else you guys wanted to mention?
I think
I'm sorry.
Yeah, trans rights.
Absolutely.
I think also like the differences between men and women are largely constructed by the system that we live in and are not necessarily inherently, like they wouldn't exist in like a hypothetical society where there is no oppression. They only exist because we live in an inherently oppressive society.
You think men and women, it's a social construct not based in like genetics or anything like that?
I'm talking about the differences in gender, which is a social construct. Like, part of the reason why we need a women's march is because there is structural oppressions based off of the system that is based off of gender roles, largely. Absolutely. So a lot of the differences between men and women, and those are not the only two genders, is based on a construction of patriarchy that's existed for like millennia.
Absolutely. Any last comments?
Quickly going back to the Bernie and Warren thing, I've actually felt more solidarity with my friends who are Bernie supporters after this, because I think we've realized that this is just people trying to pit us against each other. Bernie still remains my strong second choice.
And Warren remains my strong second choice.
And thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. We're out here today, 2020 Women's March. Your sign says Trump regime is undermining our Constitution. GOP is complicit. Vote them out in 2020.
Exactly.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here, what it means for you to be out here?
Well, I've attended the first Women's March right after the inauguration, which was really empowering, and I felt like it was time for women to really get involved. And for the last 3 years, I've just watched the destruction and the undermining of the Constitution, and our rules of law and our agencies and how things are. And this man is completely ignorant, uncurious, and he's a national disgrace. He has a disregard for everything that makes America America. Yeah. So more specifically, I feel it's really important that people register to vote, be involved, understand what's at stake. I feel like too many people don't even understand the basic civics of our government, how money's distributed, who writes the laws, how things are negotiated. This man has no understanding of foreign policy. It's very dangerous. It could send all our young people to war. I almost feel like the House should institute the draft, because then maybe young people would wake up if they felt threatened. I grew up in the Vietnam era, and it was the most horrifying experience.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, because this says the GOP is complicit, vote them out in 2020. But I wanted to ask though, is this march inclusive to all women who may be Trump supporters or pro-life women? Okay.
Yes, because I basically feel it's open to everyone, even not just women. Because I just feel that basically there's a lack of information. The media is dominated by major corporations. It's very difficult for people to get real information. A lot of people don't read newspapers, which are fact-checked. They have ombudsmen. They cannot print fake information, and people are very opinionated and tribal these days, and they don't really know what to believe. They get too much information that's distorted or. I
wanted to follow up with you on some of the things that the media is doing. So Elizabeth Warren said that in 2016 she met with Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders said that a woman can't be president. So do you believe Elizabeth Warren there, and do you think Bernie Sanders is a sexist?
I do not believe Bernie Sanders is a sexist. I actually like both of them very much, and I'd be happy to see either one as president. And I really feel that the media is feeding this controversy. And I really think...
Don't you guys think that Elizabeth Warren pushed this, if anything, though? This wasn't like the media spinning it harder than Elizabeth Warren was.
Not an important issue. The important issues are things about our civil rights, things about...
Well, sexism is important, right? If Bernie Sanders is sexist, that's important, right?
Bernie Sanders is not a sexist. I love Warren. I really think this controversy should be put to rest. There's far much more on the table. This is just a side distraction, the same way Trump throws nonsense up so that people don't really see what he's doing. I feel like this is being pushed to the forefront, and there's much more to talk about. And they share so much in common about policy, and they're both really viable, wonderful candidates.
I want to follow up. So we've obviously never had a female president before. What do you think that a female could bring to the table that maybe a man hasn't in the past?
Well, they say women are really great negotiators.
Okay.
Don't forget, the last woman that ran against a man did receive 3 million more votes than the man. Just because she didn't become president doesn't mean that she wouldn't have. Sure. She had the votes.
Yeah, she won the popular vote. Right. I wanted to follow up with you guys on another topic. So in years past, the march was organized by Linda Sarsour, Tamika Mallory. They had to step down because of charges of anti-Semitism. Do you think that stains the march at all? And do you think those leaders were rightfully forced to resign? And any of you guys can answer if you have any input.
Well, I
would give a similar answer to what Jill just said. I think that is a very complicated issue. To be anti-Israel political hierarchy is not the same as being anti-Semitic.
Well, some people say it's worse than that. People are saying specifically that they're anti-Semitic. Do you think that they didn't rightfully need to step down?
I don't know. They did for public relations reasons. I don't care if they stayed or not.
Would you guys have cared if Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour didn't step down?
If they hadn't stepped down?
Yeah, would you guys not care?
No, I wouldn't care. I would still be here today.
Absolutely. I would be
I
here
think
today.
these points are
Yeah.
Oh,
I think those
they're,
kinds of issues.
they're overshadowing the real importance of there's unity among people and women that get splintered by all these kinds of questions.
But
Why
you don't
are
want to
we
have the
talking
march
about
stained by anti-Semitism because then Jewish women wouldn't feel welcome, of course.
First of all, half of us are Jewish.
Okay.
More than half of us here are Jewish.
And I always laugh because somehow at every rally I always end up behind a free Palestine, which I do believe in a two-state solution, so that doesn't bother me at all. And it's far more complicated. I think things get really distorted and twisted. I think there's all these power struggles, which I'm not a part of, a leader of. I'm not in charge of anything, so I really don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But I think it's really important just for unification and empowerment of women and young people and everybody. And it's really about information.
Last question. I know I've been asking you guys a few, and this is going to be another tough one. In today's political day and age, we talk a lot about trans women. So do you guys think trans women are equivalent to that of a woman assigned female at birth?
Yes, everybody's equivalent. Whatever
you are, go for it.
Do you think that trans women should be able to participate in female sports, although they might have some sort of competitive advantage?
I really don't know anything about sports.
I know they're talking about the whole testosterone thing, but yeah, I think if whoever you identify as, and then there's all these categories, I would imagine that if they qualify, they participate.
But if they have a competitive advantage over biological women, you don't foresee that being an issue?
I know there was that whole thing with, I can't think of her name now, because and it just seemed really horrible because she was such an amazing athlete, and I don't know how much the testosterone really affects her ability to perform.
Well, it's also male puberty that they go through, and men are more naturally athletic than women, so that's where that whole issue comes up.
I mean, genetic engineering is going to make this particular argument completely obsolete.
Okay. Interesting. You think but then what is the distinction between men and women if men can become women? Where does the distinction begin to arise?
I'm so bored by the question. The question.
A question of what is a man and what is a woman? What do you guys
I
think?
have a question for you.
Can you answer mine first and then I'll do it?
Okay, what's the question?
So how do we distinguish between men and women now if men can become women? Are there anything that deciphers a man from a woman? It isn't her genitalia anymore, right?
They vary. Men vary very, very much, and women very much in their behavior and in their physicality.
But is there a difference between men and women?
Range. There's a big range. It's like from A to Z. It's no longer only two sides. In fact, it never was. It's not two things only. It's a broad rainbow of.
Well, genetics are right. Genetic.
There's a genetic difference, but then there's a whole nurture difference. So some men grow up in one way, and in another way, some grow up very macho, and some grow up more feminine, perhaps you might say.
Well, thank you guys for your time. I wanted to say, what was your question? You wanted to ask me something?
Who you guys are?
I have a YouTube channel, and I'm press, so you can check me out. If you look up ELAD, you guys will find me. Just quickly, in conclusion, anything else you guys wanted to mention?
We should be talking more about equal pay for, men and women and how
gender equality, pay equality, and people must vote in 2020. Their future depends on it.
Cool, so we have a nice big banner over here. What does the banner say?
Together we stand.
Awesome. So we're out here for the 2020 Women's March. I see you got the girl power pussy hat on. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here, what it means for you to be out here?
Well, I am part of the Me2 Movement, a survivor. I'm a minority, Latina, a woman. I got the double whammy. I have my family coming from other countries. I have relatives from other countries trying to come and build a better life here. And I stand firmly with my fellow immigrants, my fellow Me Too women, and everyone in general. Yeah. Not even just women, as well as men. Because that's definitely a category, that's definitely an area people surpass when thinking about feminism. Men also deserve the opportunity to express their emotions and to break the stigma of be a man.
Yeah. I want to follow up with you on the Me2 movement, the Believe All Women stuff. So recently in the Democrat Party, Elizabeth Warren said that in a 2016 meeting with Bernie Sanders, that Bernie Sanders said that a woman can't be president. So do you believe Elizabeth Warren there, and do you think that's a sexist thing of Bernie Sanders to say?
Honestly, I do not agree with that. I believe anyone can be president, woman, man, non-binary, anyone. If you really put your mind to it and you really want to make a difference in this country, go for it.
So we obviously haven't had a female president yet. What do you think that a female president could bring to the table that a male president wouldn't be able to?
There's a lot of different things I'd say. It's definitely a big different perspective. I believe that a female president would also encompass around female rights in not only our country, but as well as enemy countries and other countries around the world.
Yeah. I hear on a lot of college campuses and a lot of media nowadays, we throw around the term toxic masculinity. I don't know if you've heard of that, but what do you think of toxic masculinity, and what is toxic masculinity?
So I do think that there is a thing about toxic masculinity where people think that all masculinity is toxic, but that's not the case.
Oh, wow, absolutely. Right.
Masculinity, it is what it is, but there's a toxic aspect to it where there's a superiority factor where they think that, well, you're a woman, go back to the kitchen. Or the other end of it where, be a man, don't cry.
You don't think masculinity is inherently toxic?
Inherently as in passed down?
No, like at its root cause, it's not.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, absolutely.
Because there's always like the different ends of the spectrum. Our whole gender identity is a spectrum. There's no this or that. It's a gray scale.
I want to follow up with you on the gender spectrum. So a lot of the trans issues also become a very vocal issue. Are trans women women?
Yes.
And I know we also have trans women participating in sports. Do you think that trans women have a competitive advantage over women assigned female at birth? Do you think it's an issue for them to be in sports together? So should trans women be able to compete against biological women?
That's actually a very good question. I never really considered that, to be honest, on my end. But I will definitely look more into it.
Yeah, because do you think there is a clear difference between men and women? And what is a characteristic of women in 2020? What makes a woman a woman?
I believe it's just how you identify. I identify as a woman. I was born a woman at birth with the female organs.
Are there characteristics beyond that make women women? Like being feminine, 2X chromosomes, the genitalia?
Honestly, I would say so. Again, this is a whole big spectrum. You can't be like a set woman. There's no ideal of, I like to paint my nails, like to go shopping. I'm a woman, but I also like to not do those things.
But you do have some qualms when it comes to trans women participating in women's sports because of that competitive advantage, right? You see that they do have a competitive advantage.
I'd say so. Honestly, I wouldn't really comment on that because I don't know much about it. I've never really looked into that part of this.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it at no comment.
Absolutely. Just quickly in conclusion, anything else you want to mention?
No, rather than if we all stand together and keep pushing, we can definitely make a difference.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We're at the Women's March 2020, and I wanted to ask you, in 2020, in this day and age, what does it mean to be a woman?
That is, we're part of something bigger than ourselves, and that we don't get left back. And that if we're going to work together, we must work as equal partners. That's fundamentally what I'm looking at today. Today's theme says that we rise and we roar, because as we gather and we come together and we talk about our particular rights, we must also make the noise around it. Otherwise, we remain invisible.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, because one critique about this march is that it's just an anti-Trump march and it doesn't really empower women. How would you respond to somebody saying that this is really just an anti-Trump march? Is it more than that?
Of course it's more than that, but most of the time when people get out and they protest, they go out with some impetus. So if that impetus has to be Trump, so be it. But as I try to tell people, even in the union, if we were to destroy Trump tomorrow, he still has a following. He has a base. That he's not doing incorrectly. That's about us. And if you believe in the values that you serve, and those values are strong, and you can go back and get the many, that's not an individual that you really have to worry about.
Is this march welcome to all women? Maybe if they're pro-Trump, would they be welcome here? If they were pro-life, would they be welcome here?
Of course. Of course. Everybody's welcome here. You know, because it's about our values as a country. It's about our values as workers. It's about our values as women. Yeah. And the story goes on for everybody that falls under that umbrella.
I wanted to follow up. Last year, Linda Sarsour and Tamika Mallory were some of the leaders in the march. They were forced to step down, supposedly for being, there were claims of them being anti-Semitic. What do you think about them being forced to step down and kind of staining part of the march? Do you think that stains part of the march?
I don't know. I heard about some of this. I don't know the depth of it. Mm-hmm. But when you're doing a march or a protest and you're trying to get the multitudes of the people, if for some reason, this isn't anything that you do, if for some reason there's some stigma, folks have to be strong enough to step back and let, because there's an energy, it has to flow. So if they did that so that the multitudes could move forward, then they've done something good. They don't have
even
to
if they were anti-Semitic?
Well, I don't know the particulars on that, one way or the other, so I don't want to talk to it. And particularly if they were anti-Semitic, because again, that's a stigma. So you're keeping an energy from flowing. But whether they are or they aren't, when you're trying to get people together at this time, it's a matter of moving those blockages out from under you. Got to do that.
I had one last topic I wanted to talk about. Many people in politics nowadays talk about the trans issue and say that trans women are women. Do you think trans women are the same as biological women?
Again, I don't have the depth of that.
Yeah.
But these are not things. See, these are things that pull us apart. These are things that bring us together.
Sure. Well, the reason I ask is that because, like, should trans women compete against women in sports? Because that does hurt women who are assigned being women at birth. So, like, the question would become: do you think trans women should be able to compete against women? And is that what modern day feminism has become?
This is good conversation. Yeah. It really is. But it's not for today, for me.
Why not? I mean, it's a women's march, and trans women are women, right?
It separates us from the greater good. Okay. Folks have to get in before they can have that conversation. So I want them in. Today, I want them here. I want them in.
Okay.
From there, we will have the conversations at this point about what moves us forward and what holds us back. That would be my fairest conversation.
This might be the last divisive question, but Elizabeth Warren recently said that when she spoke to Bernie Sanders in 2016, that he said that a woman can't become president. Do you believe Elizabeth Warren, and do you think that Bernie Sanders is sexist?
I believe Elizabeth Warren. I don't know whether he said that or not, but if there was the inclination of it, if there was you can say things and it gets it's like spun, but it's good that came up.
So you believe Elizabeth Warren?
I believe Elizabeth Warren without a doubt. I do. Because it's not something I haven't heard by the nature of my climb when I've been running for offices in my union as well.
Absolutely. Quickly in conclusion, anything else you want to mention?
Nothing more other than I'm glad to be here today amongst the many. I hope this grows. We're in Washington. We're moving around, the circle of Columbus Circle, and we're hoping to meet our sisters there a little later on today.
Absolutely.
Hopefully Mother Nature will be in our favor today.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Hey everybody, thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode. Let me know what you thought of the episode down in the comments. Your first time here, guys, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Till next time, stay barely informed.